Sarah, a hard-working single mother and loyal employee at a busy corporate office, had always believed kindness mattered, even when no one was watching. One stormy evening, she went out of her way to help a struggling janitor she'd never met, not knowing that small act would change her life forever. The office building was nearly empty that night, its fluorescent lights buzzing softly over rows of vacant desks. Sarah sat at her workstation, the only sound the rhythmic clicking of her keyboard. She rubbed her tired eyes, glancing at the clock, almost 10 p.m. Again. Being a single mom meant long hours, juggling work deadlines with making sure her little boy had dinner waiting at home. Tonight, she'd told herself she'd finish early, but once again, the pile of reports kept her rooted to the chair. At last, Sarah saved the final file and gathered her things. She stepped into the hallway, heels echoing against the polished floor, when she noticed someone at the far end of the corridor. A man in ragged coveralls was awkwardly balancing a bucket, mop, and heavy box of cleaning supplies. His face looked weary, his shoulders slumped, and it was clear he was struggling. A few employees who passed him gave dismissive glances but kept walking, muttering about their own busy nights. Sarah hesitated for just a moment. She didn't know him, probably the new janitor they had mentioned during the last staff meeting, but something about the way his hands trembled as he tried to steady the load tugged at her heart. Without overthinking, she quickened her steps and offered, "Here, let me help you with that." The man looked startled, almost as though he didn't expect anyone to notice him. His eyes, kind yet tired, studied her for a moment before he shook his head. "Oh, no, ma'am, you don't have to. It's heavy work." But Sarah smiled, already taking half the load from his arms. "Maybe so. But no one should have to carry all of this alone." Together, they walked down the hall, sharing light conversation. He asked about her long night, and she laughed softly, explaining she'd grown used to them. She didn't pry into his life, but her warmth was undeniable, the kind of kindness that asked for nothing in return. As they reached the storage room, he gave her a quiet thank you, his voice filled with something she couldn't quite place, gratitude, but also surprise. Sarah waved it off with a grin. "We all need a hand sometimes. Don't we?" She had no idea that this simple gesture, offered to a man she thought was invisible to everyone else, would soon change the course of her entire life. The next morning, Sarah walked into the office with a sense of quiet relief. Her late-night effort had paid off, the reports were done, and she felt a small spark of pride knowing she was keeping everything afloat for herself and her little boy. She smiled at the receptionist, gave a polite nod to a coworker, and carried her coffee to her desk like any other day. But before she could even settle into her chair, her phone buzzed with an email, "Please report to HR immediately." Her stomach tightened. HR rarely summoned anyone without warning, and the words made her palms damp with unease. She straightened her blouse, tucked a strand of hair nervously behind her ear, and made her way down the hall. The HR manager sat stiffly behind a desk, a folder open before her. "Sarah, thank you for coming in. We've reviewed your recent work and, there have been some mistakes." Sarah blinked. "Mistakes? I checked everything twice last night." The manager's tone was firm, almost rehearsed. "Unfortunately, the error on the quarterly report has cost the company time and resources. Responsibility falls on you." Her heart sank. She remembered that report vividly, the one another department had altered before passing it along to her. She had caught inconsistencies and flagged them, but she hadn't been the one to approve the final version. She tried to explain, but the manager raised a hand. "I'm sorry, Sarah. The decision has already been made. Your employment is terminated effective immediately." Her world seemed to tilt. Fired? Just like that? After years of loyal work, late nights, and sacrifices no one else saw. She gathered her few belongings into a box, her vision blurring with unshed tears. Around her, whispers stirred, co-workers leaning toward one another, curious glances following her as she walked toward the elevator. Some looked sympathetic, but no one spoke up. Clutching the box to her chest, Sarah thought about the janitor she had helped the night before. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if she had been foolish, pouring herself out for others when, in the end, kindness didn't seem to matter. As the elevator doors slid shut, she took a shaky breath. She had no idea that her story wasn't over. The world had seen more than she realized. The office felt strangely unsettled the day after Sarah's sudden dismissal. Conversations that usually buzzed around the coffee machine were quieter, more cautious, as though everyone was aware of something but afraid to speak too loudly. A ripple of unease ran through the building. It started when Mark from accounting mentioned seeing the new janitor wandering into conference rooms the night before. "Weird, right?" he muttered to a colleague. "Why would a janitor be asking questions about workflow and management systems?" Others chimed in with similar accounts. Someone had seen him in the cafeteria, carefully watching how employees treated the staff. Another recalled how he asked about what it was like to work long hours and whether managers ever noticed. Slowly, a picture began to form: this wasn't a janitor at all. By lunchtime, the whispers had grown into cautious speculation. "Maybe he's some kind of inspector," one person suggested. "Or a consultant," another guessed. Yet, among all the rumors, one name kept surfacing: Sarah. She had been the only one, they recalled, who had stopped to help him when others brushed past. Meanwhile, Sarah sat at home on her couch, her young son playing quietly with his toys beside her. She stared at the unopened box of her office belongings on the coffee table, still numb from how quickly everything had unraveled. The thought of bills stacking up without her paycheck gnawed at her, but worse was the lingering ache of injustice, being blamed for something she hadn't done. Her son tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, why are you sad?" he asked in his small, innocent voice. She forced a smile, smoothing his hair. "Mommy's just tired, sweetheart. But we'll be okay." She believed in kindness, but in that moment, her faith wavered. Had it all been pointless? The late nights, the loyalty, the small acts of care no one seemed to notice. Back at the office, though, her story was spreading further. Co-workers recalled how she had carried the janitor's supplies without hesitation, treating him with respect. What no one knew yet was that this very act, the one Sarah had already forgotten, was about to become the turning point of her life. The whispers of truth were growing louder, and soon, everyone would know exactly who that janitor really was. The next morning, the office buzzed with an unusual energy. Employees were called into the main conference hall for what was announced as an urgent company-wide meeting. Whispers bounced between cubicles, speculation about layoffs, mergers, or even closures. The air felt thick with tension. As people filed in, Sarah was absent, sitting at home with her son, completely unaware that her name was about to echo through those very walls. The conference hall lights dimmed, and a man stepped onto the stage. Gasps rippled across the room. It was the janitor, but not in ragged coveralls this time. He now wore a sharp suit, polished shoes, and carried himself with unmistakable authority. Employees exchanged shocked glances, some covering their mouths in disbelief. The man took the microphone, his voice steady. "Good morning. Some of you may know me as the janitor. But that was just a disguise." He paused, letting the silence settle. "My name is William Hayes. I am the CEO of this company." The room erupted in murmurs. Some couldn't believe it, others nodded as if pieces of a puzzle were finally snapping into place. William continued, "I wanted to see for myself how employees treated one another, especially those they believed had no power. I walked your halls, asked questions, and watched carefully. Many were too busy to notice, too hurried to care. But one person stood out. His eyes scanned the crowd. Her name is Sarah." The room fell silent. "She stopped to help me without hesitation," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "She treated me with dignity, not because she thought it would benefit her, but because it was simply who she is. That is the kind of character this company needs. And yet, yesterday, that same woman was fired for a mistake that wasn't hers. Employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats, shame flickering across their faces. The HR manager who had delivered Sarah's termination sat stiffly, color draining from her cheeks. William straightened, his tone resolute. Today, we are correcting that mistake. Sarah will be reinstated, effective immediately. Not only that, she will be promoted. Because true leadership begins with compassion. Applause broke out, tentative at first, then swelling into thunderous claps. For the first time in years, employees felt something deeper than fear or ambition. They felt inspired. And though Sarah wasn't there to see it yet, her kindness was finally being seen for what it truly was, extraordinary. The next morning, Sarah woke up still heavy-hearted. She packed her son's lunch and forced herself to smile as she kissed his forehead before school. She didn't know what the future held, only that she had to keep going, somehow. When her phone rang mid-morning, she almost ignored it, expecting another bill collector or a well-meaning friend checking in. But the voice on the other end was firm, professional, and almost too shocking to believe. Sarah. This is Mr. Hayes, the CEO. I'd like you to come back to the office today. We owe you an apology. Her heart pounded. She thought it was a cruel mistake, but curiosity and a flicker of hope carried her back to the very place she'd left in shame. When she entered the lobby, she froze. Dozens of co-workers stood waiting. Conversation stopped, and all eyes turned to her. Instead of the whispers and judgment she had faced the day she was fired, there was something different: warmth, respect, even admiration. Mr. Hayes himself approached her, no longer the man in coveralls, but the leader of the company. His voice carried through the hall as he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Yesterday, this woman was cast aside unfairly. Today, we welcome her back, not just as an employee, but as a reminder of the values we should all live by. Sarah's throat tightened as applause broke out around her. Some co-workers clapped hesitantly, others with tears in their eyes. Even those who had once ignored her offered smiles of support. Mr. Hayes turned to her directly. Sarah, your kindness inspired me. You treated me with humanity when you thought no one was watching. That's the kind of integrity this company needs at its core. I'm reinstating you, effective immediately. And I'm promoting you to team lead. For a moment, Sarah couldn't breathe. Her mind replayed the moment she had carried a stranger's bucket of supplies, never imagining it would come to this. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "Thank you." But it wasn't just gratitude she felt, it was vindication. Proof that kindness was never wasted, even when it seemed unnoticed. As she stood there, surrounded by applause, Sarah realized something she would never forget: sometimes the smallest act of compassion can echo louder than 1,000 grand gestures. And in choosing kindness, she had changed her life forever.